podcast that I was featured on called Black Sit Global, started by a Black woman, Krishan Wright, who is currently now living in Portugal from the US, but a community of over 10,000 Black Americans that are deciding to live and Black Sit the US to all over the world. So everyone's story and how they tell their story will look different, but it is so powerful. It is extremely powerful and is likely the reason that these trends of migration are currently happening, because we are no longer dependent upon the narratives, the media that has been shared with us intentionally for us to assume essentially the worst about ourselves and our brothers and sisters. So here, the power of social media, as also discussed in the previous panel around, and I think he said public media is how he addressed it, but the power of social media is huge and impactful in this global reconnection of the diaspora and the African continent. And after about a year on the continent of Africa, my friends all encouraged me, really much like forced me to begin sharing my experience on social media. And in the beginning, I received a lot of backlash as to why I would make this move. At the time, there was a lot of, and still, massive gun violence, social conflict, political conflict in my country, and I received a lot of backlash around why I wouldn't stick around to stay and fight it out, or why I would go to a place where my ancestors were sold away and decide that I could live amongst people that would do such a thing without recourse or without reparation. And eventually, my story started to pick up. And in less than, I'd say, 2 years, between this channel and several other social media channels across Instagram, LinkedIn, and YouTube, we have over 5 million views from all over the world of diaspora that are looking to return to the continent, looking to return to their home countries or other countries on the continent where they believe that they can find economic promise. I've supported over 100 families and entrepreneurs to not only travel to the continent, but to also relocate to the continent of Africa, bringing their businesses, building their businesses here on the continent, and over $3 million in economic impact through tourism, through investment, and through those repatriation efforts. And so the data around studying how social media has created this trend of migration, expansion, and investment here on the continent is not limited to me, because there are several people that were doing it before me. There are more that are doing it alongside me, and there is an immense amount of opportunity here to support creators, for Africans on the continent to share their story, to continue to elevate this message and announce this message to the world that Africa is not next, it is now. And so together we can do this. And how do we do this? We must be intentional in bridging the gap with our strengths, investing in collaborating with creators that are telling their stories and innovators that are doing the work to create sustainable growth, a future of Africa for Africans with governments, institutions of education, and the private sector to successfully achieve the goals of and aspirations of Agenda 2063, because a better Africa is not a dream, it's a deadline. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ashley. It's amazing how one person can have such a major impact, and I think it's a challenge for all of us, the youth in particular, that with the kind of reach that Ashley has through social media, it's not impossible for each of us to also do the same. So I'd like now to open the floor for questions, but before we start, or as you think about your question, I'd like to invite Ashley and Wamweni, that in the room today we have representatives from high commissions very powerful people. We have senior officials from a number of countries in the continent. We have young people, we have the private sector. What would you like them to do for you to have a better reach for young people to contribute to Africa's development, whether it's young people in the continent or outside the continent? What should they do differently? You have given us some ideas, Ashley, but added to that, if we go back to our offices on Monday, what should we do? So perhaps as you think about that question, let's open the floor also for more young people, or not young people, anyone. Another young person, please come through.
Good afternoon. I'm Garrett Webster. Thank you for what you guys have shared.
Can you just say where you're from, please?
From Jamaica. My company is Africa Accessible. My question is around seeing that I'm part of the diaspora on two fronts, the Caribbean and also the U.S. context. As countries try to engage with the diaspora in areas like those, North America, South America, the Caribbean, do you advise that they have their own strategies as far as connecting with the diaspora, a unified strategy? What are some of the low-hanging fruits as far as being able to engage with the diaspora? I know tourism is a big thing, and looking to market the destinations to the African Americans and Africans in diaspora. What are some of the low-hanging fruits as far as being able to connect with those people from those parts of the world?
Thank you for that question. I don't know if it was directed to me or to Ashley or to Amweni. I'll attempt to answer, but Ashley, if also you have some ideas, please come through. Nico?
All right, thank you very much, and it's Nico from AUDA NEPAD. And the portfolio that I handle is within our partnerships division, in particular looking at the way in which we can engage the private sector around Agenda 2063. And thank you very much, Wamweni, and thank you very much, Ashley, as well, and Ashley also sharing your own personal journey. Towards the end, you made a very interesting comment that stuck with me in terms of the role of the private sector when it comes to Agenda 2063. As those in the room may be aware, we've just completed the first decade of the implementation of Agenda 2063, and starting next year, we now enter into the second decade. And in line with that, we've developed, of course, a plan of action. But now my question is, how do you think, Ashley, in your experience, can we as AUDA NEPAD actively engage the private sector and walk hand in hand as we move towards implementing all the ambitious aspirations within the second 10-year implementation plan of Agenda 2063? Thanks.
Thank you. Let's take the third question and then we can go back to our panelists. We will do a second round, just so we don't forget the questions. But please come through.
Asad Al-Malik. I am from New Orleans, currently at University of Witwatersrand. My question, first, to answer your question about the powerful people in this room, as a recent immigrant to South Africa, I think one of the most powerful and impactful things that these very powerful people can do is to make the immigration process a lot easier and to offer more visa options. But my question for Ashley is, how do we attract the African American youth who are not Pan-African in orientation? Here's what I mean. Right now in South Africa, nurses are being poached by Canada, Ireland, and Germany. However, we have at least 25 historically black colleges and universities in the United States with nursing programs pushing out almost 1,000 new nurses every year. How can we attract those individuals? How can we make South Africa and the African continent as a whole an attractive prospect for those who are not interested in necessarily reconnecting with the continent, any ancestral ideas, but real world concrete ways of of living, if that makes sense.
Thank you so much for those brilliant questions. So let's take those three for now. Wamweni, do you want to start to respond to any of those three, please?
Yes, sure. I hope that it's okay if I keep my video off, please preserve my internet connectivity. I think the first question that I would like to address is the last question, and this is a comment that has been made by Assad in terms of how we're able to keep, the skills, such as the nurses in South Africa, keeping them in the country. I think first of all, we need to address the structural issues, which are first of all being the reason for them leaving in the first place. In my presentation, I spoke about things such as inequalities, standards of living. There are several other issues. There are things like the difference in pay and wage and all of those things that make, Africans feel like their world is a better place to go, even in terms of infrastructure. So I think that at a national level, if we want to address keeping the skills and the knowledge and the expertise of the continent within the continent, there are certain structural things that we need to first address at a national level and then at a continental level as well. And then my other response would be in terms of low-hanging fruit. I would also like to go back again to just saying that the African Union does have certain frameworks and policies that it has in terms of how the African continent goes about engaging Africans in the diaspora. But at the end of the day, ownership of those policies and frameworks and recommendations is up to the countries. So if the African Union has a policy on how Africa can go about engaging the diaspora in terms of business, in terms of trade, ownership at the national level is extremely important for those things to actually be implemented on the ground where it matters most. So those are my two responses. Over.
Thank you very much, Wamweni. I think you've challenged us a little bit also as policymakers that in order to attract young people and the diaspora back into the continent, we need to think about standards of living, inequality. How can we make our countries better to live in so that we can attract the people in the diaspora? Ashley, would you like to answer some of the questions, please?
Yes. So I think the initial question around what government can do in the future of creating a sustainable continent for us all is collaboration. Collaboration with the people that are closest to the problems, because those are the ones that know how to solve them. But also having a critical eye to opportunities that may not be in the best interest of the future of the continent of Africa and Africans for this continent. And so basically that collaboration, the first point is so critical because I think for our leadership that has, done very well in their work, face challenges and continue to face challenges, the youth that are facing these problems head on daily are being creative. They are figuring it out, making a way, but have so many answers to the problems that policymakers are sitting around and discussing on a regular basis. So I think that is a huge need, reaching into the communities, finding and identifying those community leaders who are able to galvanize the youth to be able to create framework around what is actionable items that can happen today. And I think will accelerate our goals and ambitions for Agenda 2063. Nico's question around actively engaging the private sector. So there are, most of the private sector, they have, values, the mission statements, and they also typically will have social responsibility goals. Having been in the private sector before, it's a hack, right? Going to their website, figuring out what matters to them, what are some of their social impact initiatives, and figuring out how you tailor your messaging to the work that you're doing to fit those initiatives, and pitching them accordingly, and activating on those works with excellence, over delivering, and then setting them up for a 5 to 10 year engagement plan so that there's consistency and ongoing partnership versus like a one-off, which is what a lot of companies like to do, as well as offering them communication strategies so that they can be, that their brand message and their social image is amplified in the market that they are trying to establish influence in. And the question to Dr. Assad, how to attract diaspora youth that are not Pan-African. So the great question, because in this space, I never identified myself as a Pan-African. I knew very little about the Pan-African movement prior to me making the migration to the continent of Africa. For me, it was just, I desired a different quality of life. And so for the youth of millennials and Gen Z, they desire a better quality of life. And that isn't necessarily working a job. That means that they can really be creative. They can eat fresh fruits and vegetables. They can be in community with people that have like minds. And so this is a part of a talk around like understanding, because I have many friends that are African living in the US that do feel the same way as many other Africans when they do seek economic opportunities or education opportunities abroad, saying that, well, Africa doesn't have what I need for my family. However, for me and my family, Africa has exactly that and so much more. And so it's speaking to those points of a quality of life that is available, right? And I do sit here understanding the level of privilege that I have coming from the US, but a quality of life that is not maybe available to all Africans, but is available to Africans and can continue to as the youngest population with the fastest growing middle class in the world, right? And so how youth can achieve that quality of life, be enterprising, so with entrepreneurship being an alternative option that so many youth are choosing, instead of going into traditional employment, they can create opportunities. They can for themselves through whether it's agribusiness, whether it's tourism, whether it's content creation. I mean, there are so many opportunities. Mining, there are a lot that doesn't necessarily, well, mining not, but that doesn't have the red tape, right? So there are, with telecoms and different industries, there is a lot of red tape, a lot of requirements, but creating content, becoming a writer, telling your story, those are enterprising opportunities that are available now to the youth of today that were never available before our time. And so what a great time to be alive. And youth also want to be able to make impact. So they, no longer is it enough to rise up the corporate ladder, making 6 figures and retiring, in a state community. The youth of today not only want to have a level of a lifestyle that feels good, but social impact and social equity is very important to the youth of today, and being able to create that impact and connect with others that are doing the same is a priority for our youth today.
Yeah, I agree with you on your last statement. In actual fact, an idea for the youth, or anyone for that matter, that would like to contribute to Africa's development, is to form partnerships with the techpreneurs in the continent. I think according to the World Bank, 2021 was a record-breaking year for African startups, where $2 billion was raised for funding African startups. There's a slogan in South Africa among the youth that says economic freedom in our lifetime. So they want a soft life, these young people. They want to live well. They want a better quality of life. And what better way to do so than to contribute, whether it's financially, whether it's your expertise, to ideas that are coming from young people in Africa. Buy shares into their companies, provide capital, support through equipment, support through ensuring access to markets in the countries that you're in, so that the young people in Africa can expand their businesses as well. We will have in the next session Dr. Victor Konde from INECA speaking about the entire coalition for Africa. To answer your question, Dr. Assad, about attracting young professionals of non-African descent, perhaps that presentation can be of interest to answer that question. But also later in the day, we'll hear from the the South African Academy of the African Academy of South Africa, where they will talk about scientist professionals database, which will be a platform for attracting scientists across the globe that would like to contribute their scientific expertise into the project. I have a question as well for you, Nico. I know you're not a panelist, but the AU Development Agency, in the next 10 years, as you develop the next STI strategy for Africa, do you have a plan for them? Is there a strategy for the youth? How do they play a role in Africa's development in AU's vision? Perhaps you can share with us.
Right, thank you very much, our program director. You have caught me off guard, but I'll definitely try my best to provide an answer. So indeed, I think that as AUDNEP, as the continent overall, we cannot speak of development and leave out the biggest demographic, which is the youth. So indeed, in all of our plans, whether it's in the space of ICT, what we plan to do thematically, whether it be in agriculture, human capital or whatnot, the youth play a very critical element and a critical role. About a year or so ago, AUDA launched a program, an initiative rather, which is known as Energize Africa, which was then endorsed by our governance structures. And the whole idea behind Energize Africa is how do we make use of the capacities of the youth in all our African countries, and how can they contribute in the various sectors that will speak to developments, whether it's in ICT or anywhere else. How do we first of all find that talent, find those youth, and two, which I think is most critical, how do we make sure that they are actively engaged when we talk development and whatever initiatives there are going on there. So in a nutshell, the element of youth is something that we take quite seriously, and to make sure that in any of our programs that we develop, we can easily identify their entry point and their contributions as well.
Thank you very much for that. So as you put together the next STI strategy for Africa, let's form partnerships, understanding that the youth is the asset for the continent. There are many bodies within the continent and outside the continent that will be interested in working with yourself to support youth's contribution into Africa. So let us please do it.
No, absolutely. And I think after that, we're going to take up a bilateral to see how do we actually practicalize that, yes.
Thank you so much. So I'll take the last round of questions. I know there was a gentleman in the back. I know Wamweni, you had your hand up earlier. Would you like to contribute still, or wait for the next round of questions?
Yes, my only would take on what my fellow panelists are also sharing, right? And I think that one of the things that we always forget when we talk about is actually bringing it into the spaces, but also making the spaces youth-friendly. And what do I mean by that? I mean that youth-friendly language. In the office of youth and home, we do a lot of youth town halls where we visit different countries, including the diaspora as well. And one of the feedbacks that we're always getting from these youth town halls that we do is that young people are saying, we do not understand and we cannot relate to the things that you're speaking about. I bring this back to the concept of Pan-Africanism. In its inception, when the whole term of Pan-Africanism was being formed and everything, the basis of it and the pillars of Pan-Africanism were unity and solidarity, racial pride and identity, anti-colonialism, anti-imperialism, social and economic empowerment, political liberation, cultural exchange and evolution, and all of those things. And I'm not saying that those things are not important. I'm saying in 2023, there is a different way in which we are calling these things, especially as young people. There are emerging trends, specifically post-COVID-19. There are things that should be included in what this whole Pan-Africanism means. So when a young person in 2023 looks at Pan-Africanism and decides to go into the records or documents that the AU has with regards to Pan-Africanism, the moment they look at that document, they say, we cannot relate because this is not our language. We don't even know what this is in 2023. Similarly to the African Youth Charter, which many young people don't even know exists, but it's a legal document that 41 African countries have signed and bound themselves to say, in our national policies, when we go about talking about young people, these are the areas that we're going to be looking at. But a lot of young people on the continent don't even know what the African Youth Charter is. The African Youth Charter was endorsed in 2006, which is 17 years ago. No one is coming to say, hey, look, in 17 years, there are so many changes that have happened. Why not take a look and revisit the African Youth Charter and make sure that it is still relevant and that it still reflects the current realities of African youth in 2023. And I think that that's a lens, a very important thing that we in the policy space also need to make sure that we're doing, bringing these documents and policies and frameworks to the level of African youth in their entirety and not just to the learned population of African youth. I submit.
Super. Thank you so much. So that's a challenge to us all, as we craft these policies, the strategies that we think about the audience being the young people and how to make the language youth-friendly, as Wamweni said. I'll take the next round of questions, which will be the last before we break. There was a hand there. Professor Chimikeka, you fine? Okay. Professor Chimikeka, over to you, please, and then Mr. Dimene.
Thank you, Ashley, and congratulations for being a multinational, but also an economist. Welcome back to Africa. Welcome back to Africa. First is I would like to invite you to my country. I'm Chomora Mikeka from Malawi, and I'm privileged to have our High Commission right here present, represented. Please visit, if you are here in South Africa, our High Commission, and so that you can find a way to Malawi. And why I'm particularly keenly interested with that is that the economy, or the secular flow of economy, has two sides. The financial economy, which all know talk about capital and the finances and funding. But what Africa now is realizing and aggressively pursuing is the real economy, where the demands to the citizens, to the nations, to the governments, is that we produce goods and services, and that we are sovereign in terms of that real sector, sovereign in terms of production, manufacturing, industrialization, that we do not import trivial aspects like earbuds, toothpicks and stuff like that. You've come, and I think listening to you carefully, it appears that you've scanned the horizon and you do propose that the young people, for example, in my country, 79.5% are the young people, based on the African Youth Charter, 0 to 35 years. So 80% are young people. The great dividend. But also under human capital, this we look at being, productive. We want to launch these young people into productive youth. What service, what good would you say is a quick win, having arrived in Africa, in the continent, and seen what we are doing here, that if you can excite the youth and have support from the governments, I work on the behalf of government. I'm the Director of Science, Technology and Innovation. Would you say that this would be a quick win based on your experience in South Korea or North Korea, US, and all the other parts you've been? We want to move, we want to win, and we want to win quickly. Apart from creation of content, which already is happening, and the virtual employment of the young people that they're able to code for Google, for Silicon Valley, for everything else that there is already doing that. What else, concretely, so that that could be a takeaway? As you are also visiting Malawi, we would want to see to support you to do that through our High Commission, which is right here. And welcome to Malawi.
Right, thank you, Prof, for that. I'm sure Ashley will respond. Mr. Ntimeni?
No, thank you very much. I was actually not even intending to make an intervention, but I'm just fascinated by both panelists, what they were saying. I just thought it's important to just bring this aspect. Actually, I know we've been talking about a whole lot of things in between, but it's something which may be important to reflect on, including the youth, especially involved youth. And I would like your reflections on this. This year is the 10th year review of Agenda 2063. And next year is going to be the beginning of the second 10-year decade. This is the first 10-year decade, and then next year is going to be the second 10-year decade of Agenda 2063. What is currently happening, I'm sure the AU Special Envoy will be aware of this. There will be indicators that are being developed, which are going to basically give member states the opportunity to indicate what is it that they will have done by the end of 2034, because that will be the second 10-year implementation in terms of the decade. So I wanted to just ask from both of you, what would you like to see included in the indicators for the youth in the second 10-year decade? And the reason I'm asking this is that it's also related to the fact that there needs to be specifics or indicators that then force governments to report by 2034 what is it that they will have achieved. Now, equally, I think in the same context, this issue of the sixth region is a discussion that is quite significant, but the sixth region is not directly represented at the level of heads of state. So you may likely end up not factoring in the sixth region, meaning people of African descent, and therefore still miss another decade without having indicators. So that's the context I wanted to just bring to this conversation. What kind of indicators are you looking for, and what is it that can be included, especially in relation to the youth and the diaspora? Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Ntimeni, for that question. Let's then ask Ashley and Wamweni to respond to those two, and those will be our last conversation. Let's start with you, Ashley.
Yes. So I also want to speak on the last statement from my co-panelist around the language of Pan-Africanism. And as I mentioned, I didn't have the lens of Pan-Africanism when I made my decision. However, I do believe that the goals of Pan-Africanism were still achieved. And so even in shifting the communication and the language, while we honor our ancestors and the work that they have created, Pan-Africanism does seem to have a branding issue. And so it can still be pillars. The pillars and the goals of Pan-Africanism can still be achieved with the intentions that, of essentially achieving those goals. And I think, Luvuyo, for your question, I'll answer just on the heels of that. I think it's inviting them in the room. So representation. Youth, they need to be reflected. If they represent for these countries more than 50% of the population, when we're looking at the leadership of these organizations, they should also represent that same percentage of the leadership in order to support the work, to craft the messaging, to add on to the objectives and the goals. And it goes back to that, understanding and having empathy for what both parties are experiencing and the challenges and the goals that each party does have, so that we can achieve the goal. So leadership, government needs to represent the population of this continent and open the door and invite them in so that the goals can be collectively achieved.
Thank you so much. So creating a platform that will allow the youth and the diaspora to engage with issues of the continent. Yeah, that can be done within the first year of the next decade, so that in 10 years we can look back and say this platform has achieved X, Y, and Z. With the power in this room, I'm sure that can be done. Wamweni?
I think in terms of reviewing and monitoring the implementation of the Agenda 2063, what I would say I would like to see is youth-led oversight mechanism, right? We all know that Agenda 2063 speaks to a continent where youth and women are included as part of the development of that continent. But as an indicator of whether youth have actually been meaningfully engaged, I think that there is necessity for a youth-led oversight mechanism, maybe even at the level of the African Union, to first of all start and sit and say, these are the things that Agenda 2063 speaks to as it relates to young people. And then that oversight, that youth-led oversight mechanism cascades down into the country levels to say, these are the things that each country agreed to adhering to as it relates to young people. Have those things been done? How far have we gone with making sure that those things have been done? Have we actually created the spaces to include young people and not just ended there, but have we actually capacitated them and given them the skills to actually meaningfully contribute in the spaces that we are saying they deserve? So that's one of the indicators that I think I would like to see as part of the monitoring the implementation.
Thank you very much. I was going to close on that note, but another hand is up.
Just a quick comment. I was at a recent tourism conference, and this issue of the diaspora came up, where we arrived where trust and relationship building are necessary for the engagement of the diaspora. So yes, there's dividends that are to be reaped from collaboration and different things like that, but at the foundation, all of these interventions, if we can make trust and relationship building central, then it would help accelerate all of the things that we seek to achieve.
Super. Thank you so much. I think on that note, let us bring this session to a close.
There's one more.
One more?
Yes. So to the gentleman around the quick fixes, right? The levers. And so I know you said besides content, but today everything is content, right? And how that looks resonates differently with different experts. So I think the easiest thing is in that content creation, showing the beauty of your country and driving tourism. So tourism, in my opinion, is a very easy win. I think I read a statistic yesterday that said it's like less than 12% of tourism dollars are being spent by the diaspora here in Africa. But the content creation boom of people showing and romanticizing the beauty of African countries is igniting a desire for travel. And we're seeing countries launch direct flights, different flights from the UK, the US to different African countries. And so with 12%, being spent and tourism as a whole being a multi-billion-dollar industry, there's a huge opportunity for those dollars to come to your country, and people will only come when they see what you have to offer. And I think the other very easy lever is all of these countries, all of our countries have amazing, beautiful natural resources. So I am a product, hair, body, skincare product junkie. Most of these products, natural resources come from the continent of Africa, and they're created outside of Africa by people that don't look like Africans. But the resources that we have here are for us, and so I've seen so much success in young women and men establishing natural beauty, hair care, superfood products that are enriching our melanin, making our skin glow, keeping our hair thick and strong. And those resources, those materials are in our backyards and don't take as much processing as being done in these mass-produced products. And so it creates not only an opportunity for entrepreneurship, but also that value add of production that stays within the borders of our continent.
And of course, we'll visit
So
Malawi.
that's through your moderator. This is a very critical point. Malawi last week was hosting the SADC Indigenous Knowledge Systems Symposium, Policy Dialogue, and Experts session. Over 10 countries were physically present in Malawi. We are talking of the very things which are within our backyard, which our ancestors have used to live over a century. And what remains and is a demand for us is now to create industries within our backyard for the exploitation of the same, from traditional aspects through the scientific methods. And I think this is what also the Council for Scientific Industry Research is popular about here, the pharmaceutical industry, but also the issues of cosmetics. These are typical serious value chains which SADC regions and the ministers responsible for education, training, science, and innovation have vetted and endorsed. We need quickly to begin to harvest these low-hanging fruits. And you could be the ambassador. Go and speak with our High Commission and all the other High Commissions here present. This is the industry we should exploit within Africa. Pharmaceuticals, cosmetics, immediately. Thank you, Moderator Mampei Chaba. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Prof. I think that's an attractive operation, if I've ever had one. But let's close the session, please, by giving the colleagues, the panelists, a round of applause. Can I just invite you, please, to a lunch break? We have denied you of your tea earlier because we're late. We don't want to do the same with lunch. So lunch is served. Let's try to be back by 2 on the dot, please, so that we try to catch up on time. Thank you very much. Lunch is at the same venue that you went for tea. If you don't have your cold drink sticker, please go to the reception and just ask for it. You will need it for your drink at lunch. Thank you so much.